All right, welcome to the Explainer. If you're looking for the exact conceptual tools to absolutely master Chapter 10 for your grade 12 economics exam, you are definitely in the right place. I know this chapter on South Africa's industrial policies can feel incredibly dense. It's literally packed with acronyms, historical shifts, and geographic zones. But hey, don't worry. Today, we're going to break all of that down into a highly visual, structured format. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly how to tackle Section A, Section B, and that massive Section C essay.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to hit core concepts, look at national policies, dive into regional development, break down incentives and evaluation, and finish up with the ultimate exam blueprint. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, Core Concepts. So what actually is an industrial policy? At its heart, it's essentially the government's strategic master plan. You'll want to remember this specific phrasing for Section A. It refers to government policies aimed at the encouragement of industrial investment and achieving greater industrial efficiency. Think of it as the state rolling up its sleeves to boost manufacturing, pull in that vital foreign and domestic investment, diversify our economy, and ultimately make our local industries fierce competitors on the global stage. Now, you've also got to know about SMMEs. That stands for small, medium, and micro enterprises. Basically, these are your smaller, independent businesses, run directly by the owners, usually with just a handful of employees. Why do they matter here? Because they are absolute grassroots job creators. The government targets them for specific support because, let's be honest, these guys face massive hurdles and a real lack of capital when starting out. Agencies like CETA step in to provide the training and financial backing they desperately need to drive localized economic growth. Moving on to how policy has evolved to address some of our deep historical imbalances. We started with BE, or Black Economic Empowerment, which was an early framework aimed at wealth distribution and skills development. But then we shifted to BBBE, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment. This one is way more comprehensive. It uses a multi-pillar scorecard, evaluating businesses on things like ownership, management, and enterprise development, with a huge focus on vulnerable groups, like women. It's a great concept for sustainable wealth distribution, but for your essays, make sure you objectively evaluate it. You'll want to mention both its aims and concerns like tenderpreneurship and how it might impact foreign investment. Keep it balanced. Okay, let's zoom out to Section 2, the big picture, focusing on national policies. Let's take a quick trip back in time. From the 1920s all the way to the 80s, South Africa's go-to strategy was import substitution. We basically slapped strict tariffs on foreign goods to protect local industries, trying to literally make everything ourselves. But come the 1990s, we realized that just wasn't enough. So there was a huge pivot toward export-oriented industrialization. We wanted to make value-added goods and actually sell them to the world. Then, post-1994, the Department of Trade and Industry, the DTI, really shook things up, shifting our focus squarely onto global integration and structural transformation. And that's what birthed the modern policies we use today. The absolute cornerstone of this modern era is the NIF, the National Industrial Policy Framework. Its core aims, highly testable, so pay attention here. First, to diversify the economy, so we're not just a one-trick pony relying on mining and agriculture. Second, to aggressively promote labor-intensive industries to fight off that high unemployment rate. Third, to boost exports, specifically through something called beneficiation. That just means adding high value to our raw materials before we ship them overseas. And finally, ensuring that historically disadvantaged groups get greater participation in the economy. Oh, and the way this whole framework actually gets executed? Through 3-year rolling plans called the IPAP, or Industrial Policy Action Plan. All right, moving right along to Section 3, Regional Development and Endeavors. First up here, we have Spatial Development Initiatives, or SDIs. You absolutely have to nail this definition. SDIs are basically government policies created to attract infrastructure and business investments specifically into neglected or underdeveloped areas. Picture them as vital economic corridors, literally linking up major booming economic hubs with poverty-stricken regions. The whole point is to spark localized job creation, empower the communities living there, and spread the wealth a bit more evenly across the map. Now, check this out. Notice how each SDI leans into what its specific region is naturally good at? They aren't just using a copy-paste strategy everywhere. For instance, the Wild Coast SDI takes full advantage of its stunning coastline for agritourism. On the flip side, the Maputo Development Corridor is all about industrial and agro-processing, while the Richards Bay Initiative focuses heavily on mining and heavy industry.
It's that targeted, customized approach that makes an SDI work for its unique geography.
Okay, listen up because for your Section B data response questions, they love, and I mean love, testing the difference between an IDZ and an SEZ. So an IDZ, or Industrial Development Zone, is a purpose-built industrial estate that is physically enclosed and explicitly linked to an international port or airport. Koga, near Kokogabaha, is a perfect example. An SEZ, or Special Economic Zone, is the newer, wider policy. These are broader, geographically demarcated areas that don't even have to be linked to a port. Plus, they offer massive, specific corporate tax incentives, like a flat 15% corporate tax rate, just to get manufacturers to cluster together effectively.
But here's the catch. None of this regional growth happens without the SIPs, the Strategic Integrated Projects. Right now, there are 17 of these massive, designated megaprojects, and their sole focus is providing the vital economic and social infrastructure the country desperately needs. They rely heavily on public-private partnerships to actually fund and build the roads, the energy grids, and the transport networks so these industrial clusters can function. Simply put, without the SIPs building the foundation, those IDZs and CEZs wouldn't survive a day.
Next up, Section 4, Incentives and Policy Evaluation. So how do you actually convince a private business to set up shop in these newly developed zones? Well, the government has to sweeten the deal, right? They do this with a highly targeted mix of financial incentives. If you operate in an IDZ or SEZ, you're looking at custom-free imports on your raw materials. Then there's the Skill Support Program, giving out tax-free cash grants for training, backed by state funding. Throw in the employment tax incentive for hiring young talent, the foreign investment grant to pull in international cash, and the critical infrastructure program to help build the physical structures. It's a pretty compelling package. This brings us to the million-dollar question. Are these massive government interventions actually working? When you're tackling those high-mark Section C essays, you can't just list the policies and call it a day. You have to critically evaluate them. So let's look at what the data objectively tells us. Honestly, the results are a bit of a mixed bag. On the upside, IDZs like Coega and Richards Bay are doing incredibly well. They're pulling in investment and creating jobs. Also, support for SMMEs, especially for women and youth entrepreneurs, is showing genuine progress. But, and this is a big but, regional wealth is still stubbornly uneven. Here's a crazy fact for your essay. Despite all these geographical initiatives, roughly 80% of South Africa's GDP is still produced in just 4 major metropolitan areas. Plus, places like the Gauteng and Saldanha Bay IDZs are seeing way slower growth than anyone hoped. When you write that essay, be the neutral observer. Present the clear successes, but don't shy away from the obvious limitations. And finally, Section 5, the exam blueprint.
Let's turn all this theory into marks. For Section A and B, your secret weapon is mastering the alphabet soup. You need to look at DTI, IPAP, SDI, SEZ, and IDZ and instantly know their core definitions. In Section B, they're probably going to throw a map or an extract at you about a specific zone. Let's say Coega. You need to look at that, identify, boom, that's an IDZ. Name the industry it supports, like the motor industry, and list out those specific financial incentives we just talked about. Now for the big one, the Section C essay. If you get asked about industrial or regional development policies, follow this exact 4-step formula. Step 1, hit them with a solid introduction that clearly defines industrial policy. Step 2, in the body, methodically break down the NIPF, clearly contrast STIs and SEZs, and explain BBBE and SMME support. Step 3, this is your additional part, where you evaluate, impartially discuss the successes, like Coega, alongside the failures, like that extremely uneven GDP split. Step 4, wrap it all up with a tight conclusion on why continuous policy updates are so critical. Stick to that, and you're golden. Seriously, take a quick screenshot of this checklist right now. Consider this your Chapter 10 cheat sheet. Before you step foot in that exam room, make sure you can rattle off those definitions from memory. Explain the historical shift from import substitution to export promotion. Tell an SDI from an IDZ and an SEZ. List at least 3 financial incentives and objectively evaluate the whole shebang. If you can tick off every single box here, you are 100% ready. To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a thought experiment. Knowing what you know now, all the successes, all those stubborn geographical challenges, imagine you're sitting at a desk in the Department of Trade and Industry. If you were tasked with designing South Africa's next major industrial policy, which specific underdeveloped region would you target first? And what exact industry would you build there to finally bridge that economic divide? Think about it. Good luck with your studying, and I'll catch you next time.